Hey everybody, Questwise here, and if you've followed my channel for a while, you'll know that I'm a huge fan of all things sword and sorcery. Things like Conan the Barbarian and Solomon Kane and Elric of Melnibone and Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser. I love all that kind of stuff. And today I want to talk to you about a game coming out from Bahr and Gallant Games called Carrion Lands, which is, to me, a sort of homage to all things gritty and sword and sorcery and heroic fantasy, and a bunch of different ideas, most of them created by Bahr and Gallant Games, and just coalesced into this really kick-ass game. Now, the version I'm reviewing today is the Arcane version, which means it's sort of a beta prototype, right? It's sort of a preview of the full game, although it is a full game experience, not a quick start in any way. There's a full amount of, and I'll link, put the link in the notes down below over to Drivethrurpg, where you can get a copy of the PDF as well. And I think hopefully by the end of this review, you will want to get a copy of this. But it's not a quick start. It's actually a full game, but an Arcane version, meaning that there will later be a full version with a lot more fleshed out details and maybe a few changes here and there. But I think overall the rule system is pretty cemented in, and I think it's pretty well established the way that the game is going to run. First of all, in Carrion Lands, right out of the gate, it touches on something that I have always enjoyed about sort of classic science fiction and fantasy, and that's the idea of visitation fiction. You're playing an exile, somebody who wakes up with amnesia, and you don't remember anything about yourself and your past or where you're at. Now, that can be that you're from the Carrion Lands, that maybe you were part of a gladiator ring and you were simply knocked unconscious and now you have amnesia. But what I really gathered from it was that you're maybe somebody from a different world. Think like John Carter of Mars, only you wake up with amnesia. Or if you're familiar with Roger Zelazny's Amber Chronicles, the idea that you simply wake up one day and you're in a strange place and you have no recollection of your past. And through the course of the game, you will start to reconstruct those ideas. You'll remember who you are. You'll unlock things like different skills and abilities, and you'll remember additional details that will help you along. This game is very deadly, and we'll get to more of that when I talk about the rest of the setting. But the game is it's meant to be very dark, very gritty, and potentially very, very deadly. It runs on a D20-like system. Excuse me. Which utilizes things like rolling a D20, adding some bonuses, and trying to hit a target number. So if you're familiar with any of those types of games, it is super popular. You'll be able to pick this up right away. One of the other things it utilizes, and this is one of my favorite things of some of the new independent games that are out right now, and that's the use of a resource die or resources. And in that, what I mean is that there are things that you don't have to keep track of. There's not a lot of resource management. Things like food and arrows and that type of thing. They all have sort of a resource die attributed to them. And whenever you are, in this game they're called whenever you challenge them or whenever you use them. So for instance, if you have a resource die for food of a D8, anytime that you consume food, anytime that you do that kind of an action where you eat, you'll roll the resource die, and if you roll a 1 or a 2, the resource die will drop one level, so it'll go from a D8 to a D6, and eventually they'll run out. And when they do, especially for food and water, you begin to starve, and you need to try to find a way in order to reestablish at least a D4 in a resource die to continue to eat, to continue to survive. I find that really fascinating. Now, it's something that's a new concept to me because what I used to really love keeping track of all my equipment. I used to really love that resource management aspect of role-playing games. I wanted to know each type of weapon I had, each type of item of clothing, all that kind of stuff. And so when the resource die, when I was first introduced to the idea of a resource die, I was a bit skeptical, but I think it really makes a game run a lot more smoothly, and it takes away all that sort of like time of like, oh, I only have 3 arrows left, or I need to grab this spell component. And while that's cool in some respects, and I still like to do that, um, I love the idea of a resource die. I love it. It makes the game run so much smoother, and it's so much more fun. In addition to that, you're going to, when you're creating a character, you're going to generate your careers. I feel, and I could be completely wrong with this, but I feel a tinge of love for the Traveler RPG in the idea that you're generating careers. It feels a lot like that. When you're creating a character for Traveler, you enter a career and then you roll to see how well you do in that career, and if you exit that career or you advance in that career. One of the cool things about this, and with Traveler, and what Traveler's most famous for, most notable for, is that you could die during character creation. Yes, Alan has grabbed that in this idea as well too. There is a chance that while you are advancing in careers for your past, you may die, and you'll have to start the process all over again. There is a side note that says that you can skip that, or you could maybe get a wound or a weakness because of that instead of your character dying. That's one of the things I really loved about Traveler, was the act that you could actually die before the game even ever starts. And I love that. Thank you, Alan, for including that. I think that's a beautiful little touch. It also sort of adds this dimension of once you get a fully fleshed out character, that you do have a background of things that you had done before this point, where you wake up with amnesia as an exile in the Carrion Lands. And so it gives a little bit more depth and a little bit more notoriety to your character, or more things that you can unlock and discover later on as your character grows. There are 3 classes available. One of them is a permanent character class. The other 2 are actually optional, but I think I would include them because I love the aspects that they provide. The first one is Hero. It's a multi-purpose role. It's not necessarily a warrior. It's not necessarily like a swordsman. It could be a thief. It could be an archer. It could be a multitude of different things, based upon maybe your careers and stuff as well too. But the sort of quintessential archetype in this game is Hero, and you can play through that. Now the other ones are Magician and Priest. They're both optional. So if you want to go with a very like Conan-esque feel to your game, you could opt out of having sorcerers and priests and just have hero characters. A lot of times in Robert Howard's fiction, sorcerers are deemed as evil, and magic was very dangerous, and so they were always enemies, or they were always NPCs, that kind of stuff, side characters. So if you wanted to get that more gritty feel, you could opt out of those. But I think I would include them because there's some really cool options. So with Magician, you have the ability to have arcane points. And arcane points allow you to cast spells. And spells are listed into 4 tiers: cantrips, and then tier 1, 2, and 3, or that aspect. The spell casting in this game is a little bit more free form than in other games. So like other D20 games that are out there on the market right now, where you can sort of customize how you want your spell to feel, or what the aspect is that you want to do. So you could take a tier 1 spell and just say, hey, I want this to be like a fireball, and it'll do like d6 damage. But you can always use more arcane points and sort of press the limit a little bit, if you will, to create more deadly effects and that kind of thing as well too. That also makes it more dangerous to the caster as well. So you might take some of that damage in return. You could also use that same tier 1 spell and do things like Magic Missile, or some other kind of spell, or a utility type spell where I want to use this to lift an object and move it, kind of thing. I want to purify some food and water, kind of thing. So there's all the different aspects. Now he gives you some examples of what tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 spells would be like. You can kind of customize those as you want on the fly. And I love that aspect. I love that you're able to sort of create the spell that you need at that moment by just drawing upon arcane energy and forming it into whatever it is that you need. The priest class I appreciate most of all, because one of the things I've always struggled with, even in my own game design and with other games that are already currently designed, is that how do you make arcane magic and divine magic feel different? And so many times I struggle, and I love D&D 5th edition and those kinds of games and stuff as well. But to me, divine magic and arcane magic felt exactly the same. It was exactly the same process. All it was a sort of this kind of blanket layer saying, oh well, a divine character draws this power from the gods through prayer, and arcane draws it from the arcane magic in the air and the earth and whatever. But the spells felt the same. So in what Alan has done in this particular game is that he has added this really cool aspect that priests have these abilities. They have fate points, which are kind of like arcane points, but fate points, there isn't a way to sort of like customize magic on the fly. You have a certain number of items and abilities that you can do, which are basically prayers to the gods that allow you to do certain things. And it makes it feel distinctly different from arcane magic. So you can heal, you can do all those other kind of things. You can bless somebody, you can put a bane on somebody, that kind of ideas. But they're ideas that are very encapsulated into the role of a priest type character. And they're not like a utility list of spells. They are certain things that you might pray for, or a ritual that you might undertake in order to get a certain desired effect. So it definitely feels distinctly different, and I love that. Thank you, Alan, for making that an option and making that feel distinctly different. I already touched on equipment and stuff before, where it's using resource dice. One of the other things, I apologize for the wind noise if you can hear that. I'm actually outside, and it's it's kind of windy. One of the resource dice things I've touched upon before is that you have this sort of level of resource that deteriorates over time due to luck and other type factors. But what Alan has included, and I think this very, very much encapsulates the idea of heroic fiction or sword and sorcery feel of the game, is that you can do certain things. You have these hero points that you can expend to do different options. So like to create a critical success on something. But one of the other things you can do too, and this pops up all the time in heroic movies and sword and sorcery fiction and stuff, is that sometimes there's a killing blow that's coming down, and you can use a hero point to sacrifice your shield. You throw your shield up at the last second, and it shatters the shield, but it saves your life. Or vice versa, your sword. You always see that in sword and sorcery movies where they throw up their sword and it shatters the sword, but it deviates the blow away from them so they don't die, and gives the hero sort of a second chance. Your weapons and your armor do the same thing. So armor actually is a damage reduction in this game, where if you have an armor that has a rating of say like a 1 or a 2, it will reduce that amount of damage before it actually hits you. Every time you use your weapon or your armor, it's going to go down a notch on your chart. So armor will reduce its effectiveness, and weapons, again, same thing. You're going, every time you actually make a hit in combat, when you'll roll a die, and it'll tell you whether or not your sword sort of dulls, or your axe dulls, or it loses its effectiveness, and you'll need to have it repaired. And I love that aspect. It makes your weapons and your armor much more valuable to you, especially in the Carrion Lands, where resources are very, very scarce. And cities, if there are cities somewhere out there, they're going to be very small, and they're going to be very dangerous to even be in. And so resources are going to be harder and harder to come by. And it makes your weapons and your things a lot more valuable. It makes you second think about diving into combat. Be like, hey, my armor's already kind of dinged up as it is. If I go into combat, I have a chance of losing it, and God only knows when I'll be able to replace it. So it makes those things a little bit more valuable, and makes you think about things a little bit more before you just dive headlong into combat. Another really interesting concept that he's added to this, and this is part of the resources as well too, one of the resources is called Doom. Now, Doom is a resource that you can manipulate, okay? And it will go down depending on certain aspects of the game. It will decrease, and it's very, very difficult to re-increase your Doom score. But You can also manipulate it for certain things. So, like if you need to increase your food die by one, you can lower your doom to increase the ability to actually have food available. If your doom reaches zero, you are doomed. You know, think Lord of the Rings as Frodo grows closer and closer to Mordor and to Mount Doom. Um, the idea that that power and that evil sort of weighing down on him, and it's it, it, as your doom starts to creep lower and lower, and once it reaches zero, bad things are going to happen to you. The end is nigh. Let's put it that way, right? Your character is doomed for failure. That bad things are going to happen because now you don't have the ability to use your other resource things. You don't have the ability to manipulate other things in the game, and it's a really really cool concept. Where the sort of psyche of your hero drops away and disappears, in the effect that you consider yourself doomed and bad things are going to happen to you. Cool resource to add into this game, and I love it. Again, it very much captures that sort of sword and sorcery, gritty, dark feel. It's got a great bestiary involved in it as well too. He's included a lot of cool things like cave bears and a bunch of other things as well. Some crazy monsters, some beast folk kind of things. So good bestiary already included in the Ashcan version, and I think that's about it. I think that's all I kind of wanted to share with you today, because I don't want to give too much away, because I want you to go and get the version for yourself so you can see all the other amazing things that are in there. If this is the Ashcan version, I cannot wait to see the full version emerge, because there's so much stuff packed into this book, and it's only approximately 80 pages, 70 pages, something like that. So the full version, I think, is going to be utterly amazing. He gives you a little teaser into the Carrion Lands and what the worlds are like and what the gods are like. And from talking with Alan, I found out that there are going to be a lot more details to that, to the gods and to the lands themselves, and the sort of the politics of things that are going on. But the Carrion Lands are this land, and he gives a little bit of a teaser into that they're meant to be malleable. They're meant to be to fit your game, but they're lands of extremes, from burning deserts to frozen wastelands. It's meant to be open for you to create those things as you and your gaming group sort of go through them. So if you get a chance, do it today. I would not delay. You're going to want to check this out before even the full version comes out. And I believe the Ashcan version is pretty cheap. I think when I looked over at Drivethrurpg, I think it was like $7 for the PDF. So go and check it out today. You will not be sorry. Carrion Lands by Alan Bahr at Gallant Games. Until next time, I'm Questwise, and I am out.